Trump celebrates criminal justice overhaul amid doubts it will be fully funded. Washington. President Trump on Monday hosted about 300 guests, including convicted felons, at the White House for the First Step Act celebration, a party intended to bring attention to a rare piece of bipartisan legislation he passed last year, and which he plans to highlight on the campaign trail. The East Room celebration capped a day of events dedicated to overhauling the criminal justice system, an issue that agencies across the government have been asked to elevate. The Labor Secretary, Alexander Acosta, participated in a panel on workforce development. Ben Carson, months after the legislation passed, and amid foreign policy blunders and a defeat on funding a wall along the southern border, Mr. Trump's administration is putting the issue front and center. As president, I pledged to work with both parties for the good of the whole nation, Mr. Trump said at the East Room gathering, pointing to the legislation as an example of bipartisan work that he said was so important to me. But some activists who helped work on you, which would expand job training and early release programs, and modify sentencing laws, including mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, you have expressed concern that Mr. Trump is more attuned to the political opportunities the law offers him, rather than with ensuring it is enacted effectively. Mr. Trump's budget, released last month, listed only $14 million to pay for the First Step Act's programs. The law passed into the Office of Management and Budget, however, noted that the bill passed after the budget had already been finalized and that there was always an understanding that funding for the First Step Act would be revisited. On Monday night, the answer is a resounding yes. We're fully committed to. In a budget justification document, the Bureau of Prisons, which operates under the Justice Department, said that it had not concluded how much money would be required to put the First Step Act into effect. But it went on to say, the document also noted that the Prison Bureau planned to dedicate $147 million in the 2020 fiscal year to First Step Act-related activities, which include the cost of expanding halfway housing, the cost to relocate people, and $85 million for the Second Chance Act grant program, which aids states and nonprofits in reducing recidivism. Despite the assurances from the president on down that the changes remain a budget priority, questions about funding have advocates on the issue concerned and keeping up public pressure on the issue. The First Step Act cannot fulfill its promise of turning federal prisons toward rehabilitation and preparing men and women to come home job ready if it is not fully funded, said Jessica Jackson Sloan, National Director of CUT50, a prisoner advocacy group that worked closely with the White House to get the legislation passed. Ms. Sloan said others who have worked on the issue said it still remained to be seen whether the White House would push for full funding when it comes time to work out appropriations in a spending bill, and whether there would be an effort to make the Justice Department comply with it. I hope that the President's budget has been amended to specifically fund First Step, but there is so much that needs to be done after that, said Holly Harris, the Executive Director of Justice Action Network, which has worked with a bipartisan group on criminal justice overhaul efforts. We need the President. Ms. Harris noted that her group continued to be skeptical that officials at the Justice Department would prioritize the issue. It was not a priority. Mr. Kushner to back the prison reform measure last year, by assuring him that it had the backing of conservatives and that it was also popular with African American voters, whose support for the president was anemic in his 2016 campaign. At a campaign rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, last week, Mr. Trump described the First Step Act as legislation that politicians had been trying to do for so many years. He added a dig at his opposition. While we are pushing and pursuing all of these common-sense policies to advance the common good for our citizens, Democrats are pushing a cynical and destructive agenda of radicalism, resistance, and revenge. The kickoff party on Monday offered Mr. Trump an opportunity for a photo op with the convicted felons, many of whom were African American, as his campaign advisors want him to expand his appeal beyond his base. Mr. Trump called. Many Democratic lawmakers and prison advocacy groups were happy to work with the Trump administration on the legislation, despite early skepticism about Mr. Trump's commitment to the issue. Some of them, but what has to accompany that, obviously, is ensuring that the bill is implemented, Ms. Harris said.
Raindrop, drip, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot bar. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that.